way to live, but an essential factor in becoming enlightened, in living in higher consciousness. Now, I was totally confused. I couldn't understand anything. But I did understand that I am wasting my time here. There's much more to life, and I'm simply trying to work towards increasing my material wealth. And then I found this huge statement from Vivekananda. And he said in that book, so long as millions live in hunger and ignorance, I hold every person a traitor who, having been educated at their expense, pays not the least heed to them. This was shocking. And I ultimately had to resign from that place to start exploring what is the meaning of life. The whole idea here is, next slide, please. Now, this is again a background trying to share the stages through which I went in life. First is as a professional engineer in a vehicle manufacturing plant, totally confused about what is life. And then moving through different stages. The first stage being, which I'll describe later, is about transforming lives of the poor through technology, becoming famous, but choosing to come back to the roots, working for change in consciousness, using reflective learning for sharing of deeper reality, and then finally hitting rock bottom, not knowing what to do, and surrendering to the universal consciousness. So this is, in my perspective, understanding life, the practical perspective, through the term all life is yoga. Next slide, please. This is where, when I left my job, after some time, landed up in Lucknow, met a person called Nardanand. He was a self-realized saint in his 80s. And he always used to ask people in Hindi, जीवनी है जीवन के लिए, तो जीवन किसके लिए? Which means livelihood for a living, but living for what purpose? Again, I was still searching for a purpose, but then gradually dawned that purpose has to be about understanding life, about enabling others to understand life. And since India is a country full of people, poverty, ignorance, injustice, it has to be understood and put in perspective, and perhaps that will lead to better understanding of life. So that became the purpose. So I would say that having a purpose in life, that purpose drove me for the next 40 years. And I think what I am today is because I discovered a purpose early in life. I still feel that all young people must strive to define a purpose early in life. We are never late. Of course, if we are in our 40s or 50s, we can still try and define a purpose. Do we have a purpose at all? So the story that emanates from this learning is to try and have a purpose, which is fundamental for meaningful existence. Next, please. So at that time in the 80s, it was the 80s, there was an energy crisis. I started living in a village, started working on energy alternatives. And very soon, like the traditional way of working, I was distributing solar cookers to very poor people. Soon discovered that distributing solar cookers didn't mean anything in their lives. They didn't use it. They used the box for storing the clothes. This was deep inside rural India. I had abandoned the cozy carrier. I was living in a village, trying to work out way, helping people. Now, this was terrible when I saw that people are actually, they didn't like my idea of there and sharing ideas about energy or cookers. It's quite shocking to me. The same village, early morning, it was wintry night, and late in the evening, very cold. There are no toilets there, so I went out to pee on the nearby field. And I saw it was a shocking sight. Very cold, very dark. Somewhere far away, there was a small girl sitting in a field. It was a tomato field, She had a small fire lighted, and she was there, sitting, shivering in cold. I really felt sorry about it because I thought I have abandoned the career to come and try and do something, and here I am making a fool of myself. So I wrote up my experiences of working on energy and the social structure of poverty in India. And you know what? I became famous. I was invited to become a fellow at the Institute of Development Studies in Sussex in UK. And I went there just to find out what it is. Becoming a fellow is almost like becoming a professor at one of the major institutions in the world. Institute of Development Studies is like, from where people go to places like World Bank and United Nations and so on. My paper was published in the famous Oxford Journal of the World Development. At a young age of 25, I had seemed kind of achieved everything. After abandoning a career in engineering, I found a career in development studies and I became famous there. I had published in the Journal of World Development, where people still dream of printing there. So it was a turn. I decided when I talked about in the Institute of Development Studies, I asked my seniors that I would like to talk about some aspects of poverty, how through which this different kind of studies through which we can attack these issues in a very direct manner. And they all refused. They said, we have a limited mandate. So I had to resign from there. By that time, I was well known. I was getting invitations from all over the world, especially the United States, the East West Center, the World Bank, and I spoke at all these places. In Japan, in Thailand, I was a speaker at a young age, giving speeches all over the world, traveling in planes, and I disliked the whole idea, gave up that life altogether, and came back to India, back to the roots, started working among the very poor people. Next, please. Next slide. No, the one before. The slide, yes. That is when we set up this institution, Manvodaya. Manvodaya is a Sanskrit term which means human awakening. So you see my photograph there. It was a young person, 25, myself and my wife, Amla. But we had a small young daughter, Aditi, who is also on this show. And then we were talking in villages, trying to understand where do we fit in? What do we do? It was all about human awakening. The term Manvodaya was given by this famous saint Nardanand. He was my mentor. I had, taken, as we say in India, Diksha. We had made him a mentor. And he said, well, go ahead, work on human awakening. And so we were trying to explore what to do in rural India among very poor people. Next slide. Now, I remember a statement made by Sri Aurobindo, and he used to say, it is a principle of yoga to recognize the determining power of what is within us, for that is the deeper truth, to set that right and establish the inward strength as against the power of outward circumstances. The strength is there even in the weakest. One has to find it, to unveil it, and to keep it in front throughout the journey and the battle. He called it the battle. It's a battle with ourselves. How do we, unveil the strength in the weakest? So we started off working among the weakest, and the weakest we found were carcass flayers, those who flay the animal of the skin of animals. And we helped them in winning a bid in an auction, because they had to go and win and for bid in auction to get rights even for flaying of the skin of animals. Well, we helped them to win the auction by giving to them in the conventional manner. And soon we found that they were earning 10 times of what they earned just before the auction. But what happened? Well, they started fighting among themselves and almost tried to kill each other, because there was so much money that had immediately come in. 10 times of what they used to get for flaying the skin of an animal, the dead animal. Well, this we were shocked again. We were here helping out the poorest of the people, but then I remember we saw one thing. We are not trying to, strengthen them, the inward strength, as it is said. That inward strength has to come from something else. It is not about giving money. And so maybe it is about visioning of what we want to achieve in life, the collective visioning. It's difficult to do it alone. So collective visioning and maybe some positive state of mind. Now in India, one gets a peace of mind by singing prayers. That is a tradition which may not be true for the Western world. There it could be meditation. But in India, we promoted a what is called a non-sectarian prayer. We identified one such prayer, a very old prayer, and we started promoting that prayer. It was a beautiful prayer. Itni Shakti Hame Dena Data. And believe me, something of that prayer clicked because we started in the mid 80s, and by the early 90s, this prayer had spread all over North India. By the late 90s, it was known as the self-help group prayer. Almost nobody knows that we actually promoted the prayer as a means of trying to bring together people and think together with a positive frame of mind. But that was not enough. We had to work on collective, self-management practices, accounts, cash, to make the whole idea work. And this, we called it the self-help group. Our first self-help group was ready by 1989. And when we shared the idea with people around the banks, especially the National Bank, they were absolutely amazed. Their head in Lucknow came to see it, and he was absolutely fantastic. What is this? Fantastic. And he enabled us to connect to all others around in the country. We became famous for being the pioneers of the self-help movement, which was gradually picked up because of the support from NABARD, the bank, the government. In 1992, NABARD, the National Bank, came up with the statement that banks have to lend support to such groups. This self-help process was not about banks. It was about collective visioning. It was about collective self-management. It was about having a larger purpose, which people all understood. So we were trying to work on that, and this became suddenly spread because of the support of banks. And you see the next photograph here. Next, please. And then we were training people, NGOs, bank managers, government officers, and what is self-help? We were getting support for training by government, by United Nations agencies, by NABARD. And for the next few years, we were showing people what is it that can be done through self-help. And we are going to different areas in India where people are trained, NGOs and others had formed self-help groups. So we were going to those districts, again telling them on ground in that area, together with all the women, what is it all about? What is their strength? Focusing on, again, the word inward strength. This turned into a silent movement. It was a wonderful thing. But then there's a big but. Next slide. Next slide, please. The whole movement turned into just money, microcredit, which is of course essential for bringing people out of poverty. But the consciousness part was lost in scaling up. And I would like to quote the statement from the mother here. She says, if all the efforts to improve human conditions have miserably failed in the end, in spite of all the ardor and enthusiasm and self-consecration they have inspired at first, it is precisely because the transformation of the conditions of human life can only be achieved by another preliminary transformation, the transformation of the human consciousness. This mother belonged to Sri Aurobindo ashram of Pondicherry. She was French and her real name was Mira Alfaza. But some of her insights are very deep. And this is when I understood that scaling up is not the point. It's all about, going towards or enabling people to reach a higher consciousness. Next slide, please. This is another statement from Sri Aurobindo. A change of consciousness is what we have to try. And that is really the real meaning of, and the process of yoga is all about changing consciousness. So while we had discovered this self-help process and we were training people, we realized that this is not going to work unless there's a change of consciousness. And so our whole focus changed on reflective learning, because consciousness cannot be kind of imposed on anyone. We can enable people, we can create an environment and people reflect about their lives, about their purpose, about work. So we were gradually discovering how to promote reflective learning. And there are some scenes from here. We have been now doing the reflective learning practices for almost 20 years. And we've kind of specialized now in this. The whole process of collective reflection, where a facilitator introduces an idea, it is discussed by everyone in a very peaceful sitting. So normally we start with some meditation, with some yoga, and with a positive state of mind. The facilitator introduces a subject, maybe a quotation by one famous person like Sri Aurobindo or Vivekananda or maybe Plato or Francis of Assisi or even Lao Tzu of the Chinese civilization. And then we start discussing it in the practical perspective. And everyone is happy to speak what they want to say. But this reflective learning is what led to beautiful results. Absolutely amazing, because people started thinking about their lives. Of course, this transformation was temporary, and we had to find ways in which such transformations could be studied over time. We are working on that. But then this is something we felt was an immediate, very important start and needed, because all the people who came, they were government functionaries, people working for the state, they were bank functionaries. Many of them were just doing it because that was only what they had seen in their life. But when we introduced them to deeper aspect of life, of how they really connect to people through the deeper self, it led to huge transformation in people's real professional working also. And there are so many statements from that we shared in our previous presentation also. But let me share one from uh, uh, another slide is working with the next one, working with NGO leaders from different parts of India. Again, reflective learning process. This is our campus, a whole room which is being used for reflective learning. So these people are from different parts of the country. They have come to learn self-help, but we try to do it through a process of reflective learning. Next slide, please. And we are now doing it across the world. We recently held a workshop in Wamunyu in Kenya. And please see, this is the leader. This is James Musioka. He's the leader of the group called Kenya Connect. And after the workshop, he writes that the reflections that went early in the morning, they were very powerful in building self-consciousness. It dawned to him and many others he had the privilege to meet that life is more than earning an income and raising a family. The deep reflections that we did were quite fundamental in reinforcing the power of self-consciousness and inner peace. This reflective learning, I think, is the core of trying to spread the idea of new consciousness, of self-help. And I believe this is where the world needs to move on. A lot of work in the development sector is going on through just giving. But we have to think of life as a whole. All life is yoga. To raise consciousness of people, and that cannot be raised automatically, it has to be through a reflective process. And one has to work on it oneself. We have to start with ourselves. And as we start, there is something very interesting and deep. We find that we are not able to do what we want to do. This is a deeper aspect of life. We want to do something, it doesn't work out. And then one can get frustrated. This is where we have to learn to actually work very hard, but then let go. Next slide. Next slide. When things don't work out, you have all the energy. It's called the vital in terms of Sri Aurobindo's yoga. It seems that you are the person who's going to change the world. The I. One has to learn to diffuse that I, to keep the I away, and walk according to the universal consciousness. If one doesn't do it, one is sure to hit rock bottom. So as the mother said, as long as we move with the common herd, life is relatively easy with moderate ups and downs. But the moment we get out of it, thousand forces rise up, and suddenly, they are very interested that we should behave like everyone else. And if we don't, we come up with a stubborn wall. And one has to, everyone, rich or poor, has to pass through this difficult test. Sri Aurobindo writes, very interesting statement. None can reach heaven who has not passed through hell. For us, it was a very difficult time in the earlier part of this century, around 2007, 8, 9, 10. Financial support dried up. All our trained staff left us. There was a road construction. There was a huge road that was being constructed. And they actually made the map in such a manner that it would run over our land. No help from anywhere. We were wondering what to do. Whole entire dream had collapsed. No money, no friends, again back to zero, it seems. And all that we had done seemed to go back to zero. The story to be picked up from here, what we learned is to stay calm, keep working, be active during the difficult periods. We continue to educate and guide facilitators with using small funds, whatever available. So this is something which is known as, in the Aurobindian term, quieting the vital. If we feel that we are the ones who are doing, no, we are not. We are instruments, and we have to therefore allow, ourselves gradually to let go, to let the forces of universal consciousness take over. We have to continue to work, but the forces gradually pick up the subject and throw up. And this is what we learned. We are not the doers. We are only facilitators. We only create the environment, and we cannot take credit for it. A very important aspect of living, through which we actually enabled others, and through which we actually feel that life moves on through such a method only. We have to remove the I from the picture. Next slide, please. So this is what we learned ultimately. Facilitation is about enabling and empowerment. It is about empowering others through change of consciousness. But first, empowering ourselves to understanding life, the different aspects of life. We talked about it before. This is a short presentation. The different aspects of living are well defined by so many people. But if you go back to the statements by Sri Aurobindo, he talked about the existence of life, existence in terms of our physical presence, our mental presence, our emotional presence, which he called the vital presence, and also the spiritual, the deeper self, which he called the psychic. We'll not touch upon this here. But what I'm trying to say is that because we want now to have a discussion with people to see how we can take forward this stuff, the deeper aspects of life, to beyond shores, because the entire world is seeping in poverty, malnutrition, absence of drinking water, social injustice everywhere, and almost half of the global population is suffering. Is there a method through which we take these basic concepts, the fundamentals of life, share it with people, and enable them to enable others through growth in consciousness? Now, there are simple steps. Consciousness is something that people get confused with. And therefore, during our training programs with a large number of people who came to us, more than 5,000 professionals have been through our institution during this time. Every batch used to have not more than 25 to 30 people. And we used to have these reflection sessions with just these 20 or 25 to 30 people. At the end of the reflection sessions, we would always ask this question to all the participants. Okay, now we've had an introduction. How do we start? What do we do? Understanding is one thing, but we have to move on and take action. What do you think can be done to act on these? And though the people, the way they responded, we summarize it into simple steps in action. And we feel that these simple steps can be the beginning of a process of raising consciousness understood by the layman, but gradually moving up to a higher understanding. The different levels of consciousness, we have to start from the very simple and gradually move up. So, and these simple steps are something that all citizens can participate. I believe, especially all citizens, all youth especially. Youth is somebody who feels young. All youth has to start about identifying a purpose in life, moving towards a new consciousness, understanding life, and enabling others to do so. Otherwise, we'll continue to have all these 9/11s, terrorism, the environmental climate deterioration. These governments, these politicians, you think they're going to solve these problems? I think we citizens have to come together. We have to act and we have to enable. We can do that if we can support facilitators in these people who are working among distressed communities. We can raise consciousness at all levels and then enable others to raise consciousness, work among the very poor. The first presentation on the 14th was about this facilitation process, the art of facilitating. It is all possible. It can be done. But then we all have to start doing it in our lives first. And all life with yoga implies that we watch our lives, we watch our thoughts, watch our actions, and enable ourselves to move towards a higher consciousness. And I believe it can be done through simple steps. Now, we have therefore evolved some simple courses on the subject. They are simple courses. Some of them are totally free of cost. And we really feel that the young, we should find mentors, facilitators who should first take these free courses to students all across so that they first start learning some basics of life. Life is not about just making money, going around having fun on the beach, or going around going to the pub and having a nice soft drink, which is okay. But there's a larger purpose to life. Can we understand that? It can be understood. It requires some sincerity, as the mother said. And if we do that, life becomes full of joy. And that joy emanates. It hits others. It creates trusting relationships. And that is what life is all about. You all can facilitate and coordinate such a subject among people. Now, I wanted to do this presentation in a very short manner because my last presentation went on for the whole one and a half hours. So I cut short my presentation today because we would like to have discussion. There are so many new terms that have been introduced. I'm sure so many of you would like to talk about it. You could add the last presentation and understanding from that, questions from that, the whole art of facilitation. We really want process through which people take charge. They take initiative, first of all, to understand life themselves, to move towards raising their own consciousness, and gradually enable that sharing, through reflecting mechanisms, to do that with others. And this is way I think we can save the world. It cannot be done through sloganizing, through protests, or depending on politicians to take policies, and then some Trump comes along and says, oh, all this is what nonsense. Citizens have to act, and we can act through small steps. I think I would like to stop here, and I would like a discussion to take place because so many important people are on this platform today. I would like them to share their understanding of this subject because so deep, so important for saving our planet, for being able to tackle poverty and injustice in this world. Thank you.
Thank you, Varun. Alexi, can you stop sharing the screen real quick? No, don't. Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm just going to put myself on mute. And everybody's welcome to comments or questions for Varun.
Hi, Michael. Did you understand the idea? Was it clear to you?
Varun? I have a question. If you're asking me specific, I mean, your first talk on philanthropy,
art of facilitation,
was just amazing. It really made clear to me systematically what our work has been, and also why sort of sometimes we're not as received by the administrations as fondly, even though our impact has been great. So it was really, really great. And this was just even more about the philosophy. I guess my question for you is, you mentioned on the first talk about homogeneous groups, so that this would work more in homogeneous. Now, no labels, no walls is not homogeneous, right? And yeah, we've had our share of, misunderstandings along the way, but is there a chance for integrated, like you mentioned in your this talk, integrated populations from diverse backgrounds, finding a common ground and then
Yes.
taking action together? That's my question.
Okay, let me clear. It's a wonderful question. I'm happy you asked it. I would ask the other participants to also hear this out, because this is a very important aspect. See, when we are talking about very poor people, they are subdued, their senses are subdued because there's somebody who's controlling them. So to make them speak up, to enable them to give a voice, we have to put them in groups in which they are happy to be to speaking up with. So it has to be a kind of a homogeneous, means people of the same social and economic category where they're happy to speak up. Because if they're sitting in a large group, they'll not just speak up, they'll just say, bow down and say, I'm happy, I'm happy with what you've given me. So it is a very artificial life for them in that sense. But when they are in their own small group, they start speaking up. Once they start speaking up, and this is the beautiful aspect, then when we integrate them to larger groups, then they have found their voice and they can speak up. So when we are talking of very poor people, we have to start with homogeneous groups, usually in which they feel comfortable to speak and share ideas among them. You see, it's a very scientific thing, and that is why this movement of self has spread. It's because of the homogeneous groups.
I'm Professor Sheila Mishra. May I speak now?
Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you so much. I'm a professor of statistics from University of Lucknow, India. My question to you, sir, is that when you realized the purpose of life, you were an IIT graduate.
Yes, please continue.
You have all the experience of life of having everything which a young youth can desire for. So
Yes,
how do you
yes.
think how do you think like the youth who has not seen anything will not be carried away by the glamorous lifestyle and will go for introspection of the self or the consciousness, because the youth at the level at which you decided this new journey of life is very different now. They are not
Yes.
having any idea of the consciousness and other things. So how do you think that we can bring the youth to that level at which you were when you decided to take this type of lifestyle? So, I
Excellent.
mean, where to start? Where to start?
A lot of people have actually asked me this question, and I have given a hint here in the presentation. It is only through reflective learning, and reflective learning made amenable and simple, demystified to them. So we have to start with their level. So when we start, even with very poor village women, when we are talking about life, we have to start with their level, their issues. When we gradually pick up their issues and they immerse themselves in the discussion, gradually that leads to a process of understanding the wider aspects. So the beauty is that one has to start with that level, their level of understanding, their level of appreciation. And this could be, very simple, but we have to get down to that level. See, it is really dependent on us to get down to their level of understanding. Let me give you one example. There was one professor who came from Norway once. And when he heard about this, what we were speaking, he had come to take this course. And when he came to understand this idea of consciousness, he described his own story. It's beautiful. He used to work with, let us say, youth or youth who had rebelled. from society, Norwegian youth who had rebelled from Norwegian society. And he was put in a place where he was connecting to these Norwegian youth. So when he went inside that room, which was full of about 20, 25 Norwegian youth, about age group of 17, 18, and they were all shouting and it was all mess. When he entered that room and he wanted to say something, nobody would like to listen to him. This is very interesting, you see. So he started listening to what they are saying. And after some time he listened and he understood that they're all talking about motorbikes, motorcycles. By chance, this fellow had a good understanding of motorcycles because he used to collect motorcycles. So then he started talking about motorcycles rather than speaking about his subject. And the room was in pin drop silence. Everybody wanted to learn about motorcycles. Gradually, he moved on the discussion to his own subject. So the whole idea that he wanted to say was, we have to start with where people are, and gradually we enable people to start thinking widely. Of course, they want to think widely, but then we have to start with where they are. This happens with village women also. We have to start with their issues. And I think this applies to everyone. The facilitator has to have the sensitivity to start discussion or a subject at a level where the group is. That is my answer.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have one suggestion or question, you can say.
Sure.
Yeah, I am Harish Divedi and I am a teacher actually. So, Varunji,
Yes.
what I understood was from your talk that somebody is at the lower level, very lower level. He's not able to speak up his mind, and
Yes,
then
yes.
the people who are at your level or the youth of today,
Yes.
whom we consider as educated,
Yes.
they have to be brought down to a level where they understand these people. So is that the part of your motive?
It's not about bringing down. Now, let me
Not
give you an
bringing down.
example.
Down means not lowering them, to make them understand the situation of these people so that they can
Yes,
connect
yes,
with
yes.
them.
Let me explain by examples. I have thousands of examples to share. You see, when an average youth tries and goes and connect to a very poor woman, let us say, and there are very interesting examples. When they go to a village, for example, they would like to find a chair and sit on a chair. They would like to find a cot and sit on a cot. What I tell them, look, where they are sitting, sit the way they are sitting. If they are sitting on the ground, go ahead and sit on the ground. And don't come up with your own agenda. Try to listen to them. It's not very difficult to listen, but people don't have the capacity to listen. Believe me, people just want to throw out what they have in their minds. It is very important to cultivate the capacity to listen. If we just sit with people at the level, it's also about the level, we have to sit on the ground. If we sit at their level, if we start listening to them, it is such a rich thing to learn. There's so much beauty in the life experience of poor people, and this is something of sharing of consciousness. So it is not about bringing down. It is about being sensitive. It is about being sensitive.
Yes.
And that sensitive is something being human. So it is actually being human and connecting to another person at a level of the humanity. And I think we all can do it, but we just need to be conscious about it and make it possible rather than being arrogant with our studies, being arrogant with I am a graduate or I am a postgraduate or I have studied there. We have to forget that, become humble. Coming down means becoming humble, really. Becoming humble and connecting to people in a way which is enjoyable to them. I hope I've made myself understood.
Yeah, you are right. Because finally we have to make them understand the situation of the people.
Yes.
I guess following up with that is how do you especially in America, because that's where we work primarily, we're having ever growing divide between classes, and I'm sure it's happening now in India or and all of that. So how do you, I guess, you know, it's like there's, when you're offered, you know, the gold throne, how do you how do you even like, how do you convince, I guess, maybe a majority of people that there's something better with sitting on the ground, like you so eloquently said? And I guess, is it convincing, or is it just a small segment of the population, you know, will have that need to then to reach out? I guess, I don't know if that makes any sense.
Okay, let me explain again by an example. I'll explain what you asked again by an example. Once, this was a part of northern India, Uttar Pradesh, near Allahabad, a very poor region where women, for their earning, they used to break stones just for their earning. And for their day's wage labor at that time was 2.5 kilos of some grain, rice. Very poor women, working very hard. And we had trained some non-governmental organizations to go and work among them. So it's similar to you were asking somebody in the US to go and work among, let us say, people who are not whites, who are blacks. The point is, this NGO or this person goes and says, well, this doesn't work. They don't want to listen to us. When I went and found out, when I went to that place, this was way back in the middle 90s, when we just started our self-help movement. When we went there, we found that the outside facilitator who had gone to that village had gone to a relatively rich family and asked everybody to come there. So we said, why did you go to a rich family? You should have gone to the poorest family in that area, gone and sat with them and had a nice chat with them. Why do you think you have to go with an agenda? Just go there as a friend. First, become a friend. I suppose this applies to the US also, and to the division between rich and poor. I think some of us have to go and sit with them as friends at their level of understanding. So if they want to play basketball, let us go and play basketball with them. There are so many of them who just have these basketballs. Or if they want to play drums, okay, let's go and play drums with them. We have to see the psychological advantage of connecting with them in some ways in which they start trusting us. When we connected to these women at their level, they started talking about something totally different from what we had imagined. We had gone there with the idea of talking about self-help, but then they started talking about a small river that was flowing near their houses. This river was stopped by some rich families, and because by stopping the flow of the river, the river was spreading and they were catching fish. So the water was spreading and it was reaching their mud houses, and their houses used to fail every time. So these women were concerned more about their houses falling because of the water spreading, and they were not interested in all that self-help nonsense. So they were interested in finding ways in which water does not spread. And the facilitators, like students who would go from outside and talk to them, would have an agenda to speak to them. So we said, why have an agenda? Why go and talk to them? So when I went and talked to them, they started talking about their houses falling. Okay, so I started talking about the houses falling. I said, okay, what can be done? Gradually found out that it was some people who were stopping this small drain or river who were flowing. So I asked this women, why, have you ever tried to talk to them? No, they are big people, sir. How can we talk to them? These were very poor women. I said, no, you are strong. You are not ill. You are strong women. I think 10 of you should go and talk to them. And I'm sure they will understand. Just this little suggestion. 10 women went, we had returned. We came back to our place. On the telephone later we talked. We realized that 10 women had gone and talked to those people saying that, sir, our houses are falling down. Can you stop, having such dams on this river? And, of course, they said, yes, of course. The problem was immediately resolved. The point that I'm trying to say is that the facilitators who go and try to talk to them still carry with them their arrogance. They still carry with them their high economic and intellectual status, and they are unable to connect at a level in which people become friendly. If you can do that, I'm sure it is about sharing of consciousness, and it has to work. There's no reason why it cannot work. And it has to be done on a larger scale than just doing with one community. When that happens, issues that are going to come up, somebody has to pick them up and try to find ways in which it can be solved collectively, even for a political reason. So this issue of race is all about division that we have created. We as people have created. And we as people have to raise consciousness to remove this division. I don't know if I have answered your question.
That was great. No, that did very good. Very. Is there any other? I want to make sure we get everybody. Anita, is that correct? You're unmuted. So did you have something to say? Oh, Angela.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, let me introduce you to the group here. This group is from Mexico. They are doing some excellent work in rural Mexico. We met them in the United States. We also conducted yoga programs for them. And I'm so happy that they're here on this program. So the word is going out to Mexico also. The no labels, no walls is being heard in Mexico now. So Angela, do you have any question?
Yes, he has a question.
Okay, I try to explain. It's nice to see you and talk to you, yes. We have a very big question. Okay,
yes,
of course, the people where we work, they are poor, but maybe they're not so poor in India because they have a house or they have a small piece of land and they've been living for 100 years more, 90 years, with a very strong paternalism from the government. They receive a small help. The small help is not enough to send a son to university or to go to the doctor, but they don't die starving. Okay. So when we try to transfer the self-helping theory or philosophy that we have been talking in the States, do you remember? A lot about it. It's very hard because in many cases, the people, they don't trust anymore in their own chance, in their own possibility that they can live a different life, And it's so complicated try to get the people out of this dimension, and discover its real power, its real possibility to do things.
Yes. Let me. I'm happy you asked this question because this question is very fundamental. For decades, our governments and our donors, our philanthropists are simply giving to people. They are giving roads, they are giving water, they are giving donations of funds, and the poor people have become accustomed to receiving. Their whole life is about receiving things all the time. And so this is a problem in India also. Let me assure you that what you witnessed in your country is happening everywhere and especially in India. We have huge programs of the government. Things are given free of cost to people. And say they become accustomed to giving, to receiving from people. We call it the dependency syndrome. I keep giving, they keep receiving. So it goes on and on and on. And if one tries to do something different, you're shunted out. Nobody wants to listen to you. So this is your question, isn't it?
Yeah.
We have this problem as fundamental problem all through, believe me, all through, every time. This initial problem will arise when you start the process. When you start the process, this problem will definitely arise. But let me tell you, there's a big but. And let me give you a story again. Okay? Because we have been dealing with these questions for decades now.
All the life.
Once we had a bank managers group. This was a group of senior bank managers who had come to our institution to learn the idea of self-help. Now, these are bank managers, big people. They have the money. So when we discussed this idea of self-help to them, and we told them one of the things to remember, and this is very important to remember, that when we try to make such a change, we usually fail. We usually fail. Now, the implication is people don't want to listen to us because they've had negative experience before. So our first attempt is usually a failure. Now, this is very important. You see, if people listen to us the first time, they could be listening out of just courtesy. They are very poor, so whatever we say, they accept. That is simple courtesy. No, I think what we have to do, if they don't listen to us, we must immediately understand that they are not being courteous, but they have listened. So what happened in the case of this manager, he remembered what I had told him, that once you go and have a meeting with the villagers, you are going to fail. You're bound to fail 100%. You're bound to fail 100%. But don't give up. Go there again. He remembered that statement. I'm talking to you something about 1996. This person had come to us in 1996. We were on the telephone call. He said, well, the people have rejected us. I said, doesn't matter, go back. He later on told me on the telephone that I went back to that village 6 times. And on the 6th attempt, they all understood and they formed their self-help group on the 6th meeting. A bank manager is very busy. But then he remembered that statement that it is not going to work unless we go again and again, create the trust and repeat. On the 6th meeting, they formed a group of women, very poor women. They formed their self-help group. And the bank manager writes that these small group, they put in 10 rupees each. So there were 15 people. The first group meeting, they had 150 rupees in their kitty. And of that 150 rupees, they gave 100 rupees to one very poor woman, because the whole idea of a group is when the kitty is formed, the money is given out to one person who wants it for whatever reason. So when this 100 rupees was given to a very poor woman from the kitty of that group itself, the bank manager says, and now I quote him, that I have learned millions of rupees in my bank career, maybe billions. I have lent millions of rupees in my bank career. But when that 100 rupees was given to that poor woman from her own kitty, I cried that day. He said he cried that day because he saw something happening of people owning their own process and helping themselves out. So we have to do it gradually, enable. Don't lose heart. It's going to work. I can assure you it's going to work.
We have a question from, I'm going to PM Saxena.
Yes.
Okay.
PM Saxena.
On mute. You're on.
I'm PM Saxena from India and belong to the team of Manodar. The caption of today's meeting is "All Life is Yoga." And as Mr. Vidyarthi said, he's trying to raise the consciousness of even village people, of the poorest, of the uneducated even, from lower to higher consciousness. That's a part of his program. In this respect, I may point out that Sri Aurobindo, who says all life is yoga, has said that spirituality does not mean high intellectuality. It does not mean emotional fervor. It does not mean even morality, question of morality and ethics. It is a process of going inward and searching the soul within. What's the process? I say only one point about it. Dr. Dean Arnish, one of the clinical cardiologists who had been the advisor, the consultant to Mr. and Mrs. Clinton also, in his book, Reversing Heart Disease, says that meditation is one of the processes of going within and connecting yourself to higher self. He has told us about 5 ways for meditation, and one of them is mindfulness. Another is prayer and devotion, focusing on breathing, focusing on sound. Even to the village people, if we tell these things, they understand it. I say only on one thing, mindfulness. What is mindfulness? Mindfulness is the process of paying attention to everything that you do. This makes your life as a continuous meditation. And meditation is a process of going within. This mindfulness has to be without judgment about anybody and without preconception. Because when you start judging somebody, you create a division. So we in Manavodaya, I am a member of Manavodaya team. We in Manavodaya, in our training programs, have introduced meditation as a process of going within and raising the consciousness from lower to higher. I request Mr. Vidyarthi to say something about this aspect of raising consciousness, the mindfulness.
You see what, again, I'll speak from experience. In our training programs, we always have these stillness sessions. We'll call them stillness sessions, where we enable the participants to first still their body, meant the physical part, stilling. And that itself is a big problem for most. The body keeps twitching, and they tell that. So gradually, people learn to sit still. The next stage, gradually as they sit still, the next stage is to, still the mind. And as we all know, when we try to still the mind, doesn't work. Thoughts keep coming in. And they rush, in fact. So when they rush, we get upset again. So stilling the mind is an even more difficult task. Stilling the body and then stilling the mind becomes even more difficult. Now, what I found is it helps if we do some breathing exercises before. So we usually start with some breathing exercises like Kapalbhati. Now Kapalbhati is an exercise where usually one takes in a lot of oxygen in the process of that exercise. So after Kapalbhati for 3 or 4 minutes, it is easy to sit still. It is also easy to calm down, to keep the mind absolutely calm. It doesn't happen, but then it is all a matter of practice. And so what we do is when people become a bit shaky, we say it doesn't matter. It is something that comes with practice. So the way we have learned our basics of intellectual learning, A, B, C, D, sentences, similarly calming the mind is also about practice. Calming the body is also about practice. Doesn't matter if you can't do it today, let's try and do it again tomorrow. And I usually find that people move in good steps towards, after a few days, many people say that they were able to have a perfect calmness both in body and mind. Now, I think this is very fundamental to achieve any higher level of consciousness, because unless body and mind are absolutely calm, which is in fact what we are not trying. We don't have to try to become calm. We just have to be still. It is then when gradually, a new consciousness, so some people start seeing light, but ultimately we have to start feeling the need to aspire, to connect with the larger consciousness. That aspiration level, once our mind is calm and we are trying to aspire, that gradually a feeling of a larger consciousness gradually down seems upon us. And I think these initial steps are what are needed for most people. And I think it has to be combined with action, because action implies we are sitting maybe in a society, we are sitting with a group of friends, or we are in a hotel, something goes wrong, and then we start blubbing out. Suddenly we get, our emotions take over and everything goes wrong. Now, the whole idea of being able to control our emotions is something very fundamental if we have to raise in consciousness. Just by sitting quiet, just by calming the mind, it's not enough. Unless we actually practice ways in which we can control our emotions also. This is something that Nathan actually taught us. And controlling our emotions can also be done by actually acting. Acting means doing something that we normally do not do. Cleaning the house, trying to keep in touch with the larger consciousness, washing the utensils, unless we go out of our comfort zone and try to connect with the higher consciousness, keeping still, we will not be able to get the results. It has to be different from the way we do things. And I found this working beautifully, even among people very poor, because, for example, in Indian villages, the whole idea of the Indian society is strewn with casteism. So once we start connecting to people, we find people sitting separately at different levels. People from different castes are at different levels. So you have to challenge them. Unless we throw out the garbage of caste, we can't grow in consciousness. We have to throw out the garbage of, that I'm not going to work with my hands with my plow. I'm only going to work on a tractor. So this garbage is there everywhere. When we become educated, when we acquire a degree, we get this feeling that, oh, I'm now a master's, I am a PhD. How can I sit with the poor people? And I've seen this really happen. People don't want to do certain things. Something has crept up in their mind, something has boggled in their minds, their mind has become closed. Unless we open up our minds, and that has to be through and clear effort. And this effort has to go hand in hand with calming. It is then only that we are able to raise the consciousness, and it is possible. I'm just telling the preliminary steps. Of course, you have to tell us the higher steps.
And we have one question from I hope I pronounced it correctly. Sunil, is that correct?
Sunil, okay.
Sunil had a question. Yes, Sunil, your hand was up. Can you hear us? Sunil?
Oh, hi. Yes, I can hear you. Thank you very much.
Hi, Sunil.
I don't have a question as such. I'm a good friend of Varun. Actually, Varun and I go back to 1971. So that's almost coming to 50 years now. And we were in the same hall of residence when we were students for 5 years. And it's not just for me to say this, but all Varun's friends in the hall thought very highly of him, even in those days, when we are talking about when we were in our teens. And we knew this man was special. And he has proved it. He has proved it by actually spurning, as he said in his talk, by spurning a very lucrative career in a conventional kind of way, and has dedicated himself to this lifelong commitment, which is absolutely tremendous. And we all feel very proud of Varun, that he's one of us. He's an IITian to be very proud of. The two things that come, I listen to Varun all the time, and Varun and I are in regular contact, as friends and as colleagues in thinking in a similar kind of way. And what strikes me about Varun is the honesty of purpose and the clarity of purpose. And both these things he has achieved very early on in his life, in his 20s. And he has never wavered from that. The honesty of purpose and clarity of purpose have driven him all his life. And I think he has got the support in equal measure from his wife, who is probably not here on this webinar, and his two daughters, who are both here on the webinar, I understand. And I am very proud and I'm very pleased to call Varun my friend. And that's all I wanted to say. So thank you, Varun. Yeah. And it's always a great pleasure. And if there's anything I can do for Manavodaya, for you, as a friend, as a well-wisher, and as a person who thinks in similar ways as you do, please don't hesitate to ask me. Let us remain
Absolutely.
in touch.
So thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Varun.
And
we'll do that. Yes.
I wanted to also bring in Alexei. Do you have any questions from your work? Alexei is he works with people in Finland doing music with young children and young adults. So Alexei, if you want to ask a question to Varun.
Yeah, I was just about to comment actually. Like it's been very fascinating to listen. As I felt like a lot of points you've been talking about have kind of confirmed my own life decisions in a sense. What I do is I've been organizing rap workshops in Finland for like rap music workshops for youth for a long time now, and what we basically do is we focus on the practical side of things more and more about how everybody's doing, trying to get them trying to welcome them as well as possible. And when we were first trying to come up with the workshops, we were thinking about all the stuff we can teach them, like as a course, like first this and then this and that. But then the message we heard is that we just want to make the music. So we just started making the music, and all of a sudden everybody's coming every week. And between doing the music, we are talking about all these bigger things and bigger teams. And all of a sudden I see one guy, having a major label deal in as an artist, and another one also. And it just came as a byproduct. We didn't have to teach them really anything. Just listen, like you said. That was my comment. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes. I wanted to, I don't know for the rest of the group, but also because we have so many people from India, which is fantastic for the and Varun from India. But so we have this No Labels, No Walls platform, and it's all about people coming together throughout the world who do different things. What role do you see that playing, Varun, in your work? And this is for the rest of the group. Also, in like, how can it benefit what you're doing in your work, spreading your message, connecting? Like, I guess what are you like? What would it like having an international platform with different people doing different things help your work? And also, yeah, I guess that's my question.
Okay. So I'm happy you asked this question because I wanted to come to this. You see, one of the things that we have understood quite well, because we have been running these international courses for the last 20 years now. And most of the people who have come for these courses are mostly from Europe, in fact. A large group from Norway, and of course, many from the United States. The fundamental thing that I see is, first of all, that the discourse on social change has to move from just simply giving to enabling. Now, usually all the philanthropic organizations simply donate money, either to some Christian organization or to some philanthropic body which is again giving something. I think, can we create a new narrative through which donor organizations, philanthropists can, rather than give, can start practicing the whole idea of enabling. That means one identifies and trains facilitators of change and supports them to work with people. So we don't give anything to people. We are simply identifying local facilitators, local youth, training them to work as facilitators, training them to have that vision, all the tools and methods, and supporting them to go and work with the community. Now, this is something that I dream of. Maybe having several thousand facilitators in different parts of the world. Those who start working with communities. And without giving anything, because there are resources with the local governments also. The whole idea is to be able to utilize the resources in the right manner through leveraging people's own resources. And this can be done through facilitation. And it is being done, and it can be done. Can we, therefore, change the narrative of giving to supporting facilitators? So money is involved here, but money is involved in a different form. It goes to supporting the cost of facilitation, of training them, and then supporting them to work with communities. Now, this is not something that happens overnight. A facilitator, for example, the last facilitator that we trained him for almost 6 months to a year for giving the whole idea of facilitation, the tools, methods, the consciousness. And then he worked with a community far off from here, and he created 60 to 70 groups, as I said in the last presentation, and about 1,000 women, and without any money. But then he had to be supported through a salary. So what is needed here is, if we can raise funds to support facilitators of change, not just support them for 2 or 3 years, but also to train them. They, in fact, are able to change the lives of several thousand people. So the cost per person becomes very low. You understand?
Yeah.
Now, this is the narrative that has to spread. It is not about just giving, or let us say Christian giving. It is about supporting facilitators, training them and supporting them. That is one thing. Can it be done? What is your opinion?
Well, I think so, and let's get to that we only have 8 minutes left, so I'm going to get to that, how we can take action together with this platform and what you're saying. But Madhav, is that correct? Madhav?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, we have about 8 minutes, so I want to make sure we hit upon Varun, but I want to get to your questions before we go. What was your question or comment?
Okay, thank you so much. So actually, sir, you mentioned quite a lot about poverty and injustices, and so with these aspects, there are another things which interact with the social movement. So for example, what has been your experience with the ground politics and the policy making, and with the government and economic policies, and how have they contributed or interacted with whatever you are doing? Have they facilitated or hindered your work? And the other thing is that, how does the idea of yoga and consciousness play into that? Because when we see that, let's say in Europe and USA, the poverty and injustices are much lesser than in third world, let's say. But there, the idea of yoga and consciousness, it has not been achieved by that. I mean, maybe it is because of state policies and economic.
I got your question.
Yeah. So how do you see that? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Madhav, what is your background? Please introduce yourself.
I'm a student at IIT Delhi.
Okay. Welcome, Madhav.
Thank you.
Our relationship with the government has always been one of love and hate. Because the way the things work in the government are very bureaucratic, and things usually don't work. And therefore, but when they work, when people become empowered, and I can tell you so many stories where the system, the elite, local elite, let's say Gram Panchayat, the village head, they would never allow the people to work. Even the husbands don't allow their wives to work. So, but only when the women get organized, only when they get organized, not just in their groups, but all the groups come together to organize themselves on a larger platform, let's say a federation. And when they start speaking up, the government has to listen, the politicians have to listen, the governance comes into place, the schools start working, the health system start working, the funds start being used in the right place. So one has to force the system to listen. And this force comes from people coming together and feeling together and willing to raise their voice. Because if something does not happen, these women are ready to board the tractors and go to the house of the local block development officer or the district magistrate. And people also have started understanding the local bank will never ask for a commission because he knows that these people are empowered and enlightened. So the relationship with the government is love and hate because it is our government. It may not be working correctly, but it is our government. And we tell this to people. It is our government. It has to work. We are going to fight for it. So you understand the relationship, Madhav? We have to keep the government. The government is there. But the systems don't work till people are empowered. But raising of consciousness among people is different. Among very poor people, it is called conscientization. They have to understand their own living circumstances and how it can be changed. But raising consciousness among those who work among people, we have been training a large number of non-governmental organizations, a large number of village development officers of the state, bank officers. I am applying the consciousness raising aspect to them. But to the very poor villagers, it is about more of conscientization. We call it social mobilization. They have to understand their context, that move together, and that's what's going to help. So there's a small distinction there. But once they've organized, once they feel that they can do it, they start raising in consciousness also. So after a few years, we start having yoga workshops with them also. But that is a short answer to your question.
And
thank you.
Oh,
yes.
I wanted to, we have about 4 minutes left, and I want to make sure we go back to what Varun asked, which is how can we change, because that's whole Varun's work in how do we change the philanthropic model. And
yes.
So maybe what we can do, so what we do is every Monday we have Action Monday, and we invite everybody to from different different parts of the world, but also different backgrounds to host that Action Monday. So maybe, Varun, if you're interested, and I don't know how everybody on this this chat feels about it, maybe what we can do is invite like bank foundations, other philanthropic from the United States on our part to that conversation, and then Varun, you can invite your network, and we can have a further discussion about how philanthropy works, and then also obviously conversation of how we can do better. Does that seem something that you're interested in hosting?
This is wonderful. That's the whole point. We have to start in getting the message across to those who matter. And you mentioned the right things, the donors, philanthropists, if they understand that this is happening and it works, that is where it all starts. Besides, our experiments in UK have shown that many of the average citizens, they can contribute small amounts. They have been doing it. They have been contributing small amounts, let's say 50 pounds in a year. But when 100 people do it, it becomes 500 pounds. It is enough to support the cost of 2 facilitators. So even an average citizen can contribute. But of course, if we connect to philanthropists and donors, that is even better.
So let's do that. And if everybody who wants to, please put your email on the chat. I will include you on the mailing list, so when we have the event, and everybody listening who wants to be a part of this conversation, because it's a model that Varun has been doing and working, and something that I think needs to be shared with more people. So please, let's continue. Varun, we have 1 minute. I want to get any closing thoughts before we move on.
My closing thoughts are, it's not just about money, and therefore we must have some reflective discussion. So if you are organizing a discussion, we'll try and do it in a reflective style. We'll try and do it in an equal manner. We are not having somebody giving. No, we are all equal, and we are trying to find a way out for resolving the problems of the world. So it is not about a giving and receiving relationship. and it has to be done in a reflective style in an enjoyable manner. And that is my last thought, because it's all about growing in consciousness. Whether we are rich or poor, we all have to grow in consciousness, and that is fundamental. So wonderful. It's a good beginning.
Varun, thank you so much for another amazing event for the No Labels, No Walls Festival. Next, we have music, and then we have an online art exhibition with 10 artists from around the world. If everybody can stay with us who's on the chat, I want to also share with you a link so we can play Varun's video through our social media. So please stay with us. Thank you all. More to come. Thank you all. Thank you, Varun.
Okay.